It's a massive problem that we have. We're basically allowing the people that control money to steal the value of that money from anybody that holds it. If we hold that currency through central banking money debasement. So it's a massive problem, and that's why what's so interesting about a lot of people, they say, oh, well, Bitcoin has no use case, whatever, it's like, it's useless. What's the utility of Bitcoin? The utility is to have something that stores value. That's currently its use case. It will eventually become more of a medium of exchange and more of a unit of account and fulfill all the different uses of money. But right now it's in its store of value phase, in my opinion, which is worth a huge amount of money. There's so many assets that are just being used as stores of value, whether it's real estate, gold that you mentioned, Jor, or bonds or debts. And there's just, all sorts of different assets that people use as a store of value. It's a huge, huge market.
I would actually say to that, I would say that store of value is probably the biggest problem we have as a society, just in general. Once we figure out a proper store of value and something that we can actually save for the future without other people being able to steal from us, it changes everything, right? So let's say with gold, if you wanted to buy a gram of gold, I was looking at the numbers for this, you have to pay something like a 30% premium. So
because of the size of it, because it's a small amount. Yeah.
And then putting it together, like turning that 1 gram of gold into a coin will probably cost you exactly the same amount as turning an ounce of gold into a coin. So you're basically, when you get an ounce, you're almost subsidizing it with 28 grams of gold. But when you get 1 ounce of one gram of gold, you have to pay that entire fee as a lump sum. So if you think about it, people can't afford an ounce of gold. Not everybody can afford an ounce of gold. And if they can't, then they're priced out of saving.
I don't know if you guys have ever had physical gold before. I've had some physical gold in my history. They charge a premium when you buy it, and they undercut you like crazy when you try to sell it. There's a massive spread on gold. And like you said, if you bought a 1 gram bar of gold, a little tiny little piece, right? 30% on that. Like, how much does gold increase on average over time? Like, it's going to take years for you, like, an average of years, right? Because there's down years, up years, whatever. Average of a couple of years at least for you to even break even.
Yes.
And then it becomes a store of value over time after that. But then you still need to find, a buyer. They're going to undercut you. The spread is crazy. You go on to any of these exchanges, I use Bitcoin well. Their spread is 1.2%. So you're paying a premium for that Bitcoin, but it's only 1.2%. Bitcoin will fluctuate more than 1% a day, right? Up or down, right? So it doesn't take that long to work out that spread difference.
Yeah.
I think that this is something I just became aware of by getting burned by it, because back in 2020, when lots of uncertainty in the world, I flocked to silver. That was kind of like I had Bitcoin and silver at the same time. And I recently traded the majority of my silver in for cash, which I would exchange for Bitcoin. But like I ended up losing like a lot of money on that, because like I bought a lot of the coins from like an exchange or a dealer or eBay. And by the time I went to sell it, the guy said that he's going to have to melt it all down. So he's going to he's going to pay me like 60% of what it was worth. So I ended up losing money. And I know, like, as you said, Forrest, like this is something that after a lot of years, which is the purpose of a store of value. It's not something you just turn around and sell in a couple of years, like Bitcoin. But where I think Bitcoin to me makes the most sense is I think about it like a battery. And when we're trading our time and energy, that's what you kind of do every day. You go out into the world, you add value to it, you get something in return. And what you want to do there is you want to protect that. You want that to not lose any value there. You're storing it think of it like a battery. And the nice thing about it, there is no leaks. There's zero leaks in Bitcoin. If you bought some Bitcoin, you send a UTX out to your wallet, you don't have to do anything with that. There's no tax on that. There's no annual fee on that. There's no leaks in that battery. So whatever you put into there, you open that thing up in 50 or 100 years from now, it's going to be the exact same. It's probably increased significantly in purchasing power, but like there's no small like fee coming out of it every year, or insurance or a property tax or anything like that. So you want a form of a store of value that's going to protect you through years. And I think that Bitcoin is by far the best battery that we've found because of that. There's no leaks in that battery.
You also want to store a value that you can actually move around, right? Like with gold, you can't. Okay, so when I went on my trip, they had me declare if I'm bringing $10,000 worth of an asset or something. If I had gold in my suitcase, they'd find it and they'd probably take it, and there's nothing that I can do about it. I wouldn't be able to get through the border without declaring that gold and potentially getting taxed, potentially having it stolen from me, giving it to somebody else. Like, let's say if you wanted to take Bitcoin, your access to Bitcoin somewhere else with you, all you need is a piece of paper. You can keep that piece of paper on your body. You can memorize it if you want to. You can memorize your seed phrase. You can't do that with gold. If you want to take your gold somewhere else, it has to be separated from you. Like, it won't. It's not a part of you. Essentially, if you, like with gold, you have to store it either, let's say, in a vault. You can dig it. You can make a hole in the ground. You can store it there. You can give somebody else custody of it. Bitcoin is the only store of value that you can actually store in your brain.
There's also there's also other stores of value. I mean, besides gold, right? Like people consider real estate a store of value, and it kind of goes to both of your guys' last points, Jor, about your idea of a perfect battery. You know, real estate's a leaky battery, right? You need a new roof, you need maintenance. You know, you might get a new foundation, new windows, all this stuff. You got to just maintain that battery state or improve it, and the entropy on something like a house is just incredible. It's just that house just wants to go back to its natural state of, being just broken up carbon. And then it's also not transportable at all, right? So that's what's interesting about Bitcoin is it's a store of value, but it also has in my opinion, the perfect moneyness to it. It's transportable. So the store of value is transportable through time. And you could argue that gold is very good at this because it doesn't corrode. It's just, the atoms of gold are the element of gold. So it transports through time really well, but it doesn't transport through space very well. As you stated, Bitcoin does that way better. You can just memorize a couple words and, transport it through space, or you can literally send it over ledger, as opposed to gold where you'd have to, insure it, send it, maybe even if it's a large amount, have some sort of security around it, right? And insurance is a form of security as well. So it doesn't perform as well as money. So it's really interesting to have a store of value that is also a fantastic money. Whereas, like even stocks, right? People buy stocks as a store of value. You can't, nobody's going to be willing to accept, an Apple stock for a meal at a restaurant, right? They just don't have the infrastructure built for that. So it's interesting to have finally something that is money that is also a store of value, which we do not have with the dollar.
I think it's all, sorry, one last point there. It's also important to consider the fact that not everybody even has access to prime real estate or to stocks, like you said, with Apple stock. If you want to go to Nigeria, for example, nobody has Apple stock in Nigeria. I mean, there are people who do, but it's very, very rare. The average person does not have Apple stock. So what that means is the average person probably can't get exposure to Apple stock, and they can't put their money into it. On the other hand, with Bitcoin, anybody can buy it. Anybody can put their value into Bitcoin, meaning that you have more purchasing power going into it compared to everything else. So like, let's say with Bitcoin, you can put all $900 trillion worth of wealth into Bitcoin. You can't do that with stocks because stocks have, it's like you mentioned with real estate, they have their own risks and rewards associated with them. Let's say, for example, with Apple stock, let's say the entire world goes in and buys Apple stock, and tomorrow Apple starts creating more shares and they start dumping them on the public. You're screwed. You can't do anything about it because, I mean, again, the same thing that goes to everything else. There's more Apple that can be created, more shares can be created, more Bitcoin will never be created.
Yes.
There's no other asset that can handle the world's capital.
Yeah.
Right.
The Bitcoin can handle that. It's baked in, right? All that happens is its nominal value goes up as more capital goes into it. It doesn't create more of it. It doesn't distribute it differently. It is just increases in value. That's the one metric that can change, right? And that's the metric that does change. And that's why people talk about number go up technology, because as more people want it, the only option is that number go up.
Yeah, that's one thing that we never really talked about. It's during this point is like, why is it a store of value? Because it's the only asset that has absolute scarcity. And I think back to a presentation that Jack Mallers gave at Bitcoin Atlantis a couple of years ago, and he talked about Bitcoin and gold, and he said that gold is stuck in the ground, while Bitcoin is stuck in time, which is like, it's just truly mind blowing when you really think about it that way. Because again, if more and more people, if all of a sudden the Gen X and millennials decided that, we actually want gold, this is a cool thing, we want to start accumulating it. The demand goes up for gold. What do? You go find more in the ground. You can dig it out of the ground. If there's more demand, you can go find more from the ground. If the demand for Bitcoin increases, nothing you can do. It's stuck in time. It's stuck in the future. That's the supply schedule. That's a scarcity of Bitcoin that no other asset even compares to. So that's the store of value. And I think that that's why we're having this conversation today, because, the perfect money has to be a store of value, and it has to be a good medium of exchange. It can't be one or the other. It has to be both. And that's exactly what Bitcoin is. So let's talk about the fact that Bitcoin is the only property that you can truly own. Because when I think about Bitcoin, you think about other things that you can truly own, which might be land, which might be gold, which might be a few other things. But what do you guys think about that part of it?
Well, I think real estate you don't really own. You're paying property taxes. They can take it away from you at any time. That's an easy one. That's an easy one to rebut. I would say the other thing too with a lot of assets is that Bitcoin doesn't deteriorate. That idea again of that perfect battery, of it just being, it stays as a UTXO. It's permanently on there unless you decide to move it. Mm-hmm. So it's something you can truly own. And in that way, it means that you can truly own it forever. Like as far as we can ever see, we can realize that, at least a few nodes of Bitcoin software is going to be running somewhere, which means that somebody's holding a record of that Bitcoin on that ledger. And it's basically the most secure thing into the unforeseeable future in that way, where the vast majority of everything else disappears over time, gets broken down over time by the laws of the universe.